Hey there students, it's Mr. Mikasa. We are back with another episode of Mr. Mikasa's Digital Lessons, and this lesson is for my 6th grade social studies class. And on this digital lesson, we'll be looking at your guys' textbook pages 17 through 21, looking at section 1 of the world at your fingertips. So the last time we did a digital lesson together, we talked about map basics and basic geography concepts. Now we're going to start delving in exactly to what your 6th grade social studies content will look like. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, I will be going through the textbook pages real quick, and I'll be highlighting certain portions of the textbook page, which is very, very important. You can follow along by looking at the textbook pages that I've attached to my lessons on Schoology. At the same time, remember, once we're done going through this section, you guys will answer your questions in race format. So keep that in mind. So as you can see, I have my little Active Inspire software over here where I can highlight different portions and also make little markings on the sheet as we go along, which is actually really cool. So let's go and get this lesson started. So first of all, let's go and talk about the world at your fingertips real quick. So as you can see here, this dateline is talking about the UN, or the United Nations. And the reason why we're talking about the United Nations in this dateline is for one very simple reason. As time is going on, the international community of our planet is becoming more interconnected with every single passing year. As time is going on, people are becoming more interconnected, cultures and ideas are exchanging at even rapid, faster paces. And the reason why this is the case is because of the increase in technology as time goes on. For example, transportation and communication has allowed us to basically interact with people we never would be able to interact before, with different communities, different cultures, different peoples, all over the entirety of the planet. The internet just by itself has been a huge bridgeway which has connected all these different cultures together. That's like if you have a kid who lives in Japan, he can make a dance track on his laptop and then share it on the internet and become a huge international hit all over the planet relatively overnight. And the reason why is because of this interconnectivity. So this interconnectivity that we're seeing between different cultures, different nations, different countries, it's going to cause a lot of interaction. And learning about these geography skills, learning about social studies skills could be a really easy way to help you interact with people from different cultures all over the planet. And in fact, when we talk about that, there's basically 5 areas that we're talking about, or 5 fields that we basically refer to. So as you can see here, we're talking about our 5 fields here when it comes to social studies, and basically it breaks down to 5 different subjects you can look at. First of all, we have geography. That's one of the fields we're talking about. We have history, which is the 2nd field, economics, which is the 3rd field, government, which is the 4th, and finally we have culture. All right, and no matter what different angle you look at it with all this interaction, with all this content, all this knowledge, basically it's going to help you with understanding different cultures, different people, and give you some context or some background information about what's really out there. So in today's lesson, we're going to be concentrating on these 5 areas of learning real quick about social studies skills, okay guys? And that's exactly what this whole process is about. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is studying of history. So that's the very first of the fields we're going to talk about. So we can get that highlighted real quick. So we have history. So what is history? When you just put it simply, history is nothing more than the study of the past. Now the question might become, a lot of kids ask, well, Mr. Mikasa, why do we need to know about what things happened in the past? The reason why we want to look at the past and why we want to study the past so much is because of one simple saying. There's a saying out there that most people say, and they think they're very clever when they say it. So here's my little speech bubble here, and they're like, blah, 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 they start speaking, and that's that history repeats itself. This is very commonly true. The saying is a saying because it is relatively true. So the question is, why does history keep on repeating itself? It repeats itself for one simple reason, because people have not studied the past. That's the reason why history keeps on repeating itself. For whatever strange reason, whenever people try to do something new or something different, they don't look at the past as to see if such things have happened before and where did they succeed and where they failed. And that's the reason why history is so important. It helps us to learn about the mistakes that people have made in the past and how to make and prevent making those same mistakes in the future. Also kind of gives you some context, some understanding of where people are coming from, what kind of struggles they've dealt with, how they progressed over time. It's a very, very important concept today to learn about history, okay? So when it comes to history, you're basically looking at 2 types of documents when you do this. When you're looking at history, you're primarily looking at what's called primary documents as well as secondary documents. Primary documents, let me go get that highlighted real quick. Let me get my highlighting tool. Primary documents, or primary sources as your book calls it, are items, documents, pictures, photographs, artifacts, anything that was created at the time of the event that you're studying that survives to the present. These are all primary sources. And the reason why we study these primary sources is for one simple reason, because these things have been there. They've actually lived through it. They've actually survived through what an event is. So by looking at these documents and learning it from the past, we can hopefully prevent making the same mistake in the future and hopefully stop this whole history repeats itself nonsense, because if we learn from the past and we make those corrections in the future, it won't cause as many problems as well. Another one that we look at real quick, another thing that we look at is the theme of geography. That's another area that we study when it comes to social studies. Now, when it comes to geography is the study of people, places, and environments. Not only are we talking about the places that these people live at, we're talking about how they live within that environment, how they interact with that environment, what kind of history that they've developed there, what kind of culture exists there. That's what we're looking at. We're just asking basically what's there, what's happening, all those kind of questions as well. All right. The reason why is because it's very, very important to know where the location of places are, because some locations on our planet, have very different issues. At the same time, have very different benefits that other regions have. For example, if you live in an area that has a lot of desert regions in your area, access to natural resources might not be very easy. Whereas if you come from a region that has a lot of abundant natural resources, you can have an easier time surviving. That's a very oversimplistic way of looking at it, but that's an example of what we're talking about when we're talking about geography in that case. Now, another thing we're looking at as well, which is another field that we look at, is government. And what government basically is, the people and the groups within a society that have authority or make laws to make sure that they are carried on. All right, it's pretty much how it works. When it comes to government, all kinds of different governments exist all over the different types of all over the planet. For example, in the United States, we have what's called a representative democracy in our country, which means that we elect leaders who then, of course, make laws and pass laws and, of course, enforce those laws for our country, right? That's pretty much how we work. But when you think about it, when it comes to government, we basically have two types of government that exist, all right? You have what's called a limited government, and the second type that you have, which is the complete opposite of that, of course, is what's called an unlimited government. All right, so let me go and look for that real quick. So we also have the unlimited government model. In a limited government, what ends up happening is that everyone, including those in charge and those who are the citizens of the country, have to obey the laws, okay? That's what a limited government means. It means that your leaders don't have all power and are untouchable by the laws. No, not only do you have to follow the laws as a citizen, but your government also has to follow the laws as well. Democracies, for example, over the entirety of the world's democracies, are all limited governments. Because yes, the government of a democracy is powerful, but its power is limited by the citizens that live within it. And that's what it makes into a limited government. An unlimited government, however, is where the government can do whatever they want without regard and without consequences, to the point where they can even break the law if they want to, and nothing can be done about it. A lot of dictatorships around the planet, a dictatorship being one person being in charge of the entire country, they are an example of limited government. They can do whatever they want without fear of consequence and without having to worry about having to follow the law, because they have unlimited power within their country. All right, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about our two types of government. So that's the difference between limited government as well as unlimited government. Now, also within your government as well as you have what are called citizens. And citizens are basically just legal members that live within a country. Now, ideally, they should have rights, privileges, as well as protections as being citizens of a country. Now, depending on your country is and its requirements for citizenship, that could look very different. For example, in a limited government, you might have a lot of freedoms, a lot of rights, and a lot of protections for your government. Whereas if you're a citizen of a country that has an unlimited government, you might have very little rights, very little privileges, and in fact, you don't get any protection from your government whatsoever. It just kind of depends on the situation for your country. Now, like I said before, these are very brief descriptions about what's going on. We're going to go delve into these topics and further as we go throughout the year. But for now, that's pretty much how when it comes to government. You have limited government or unlimited government. Now, another area that we have, of course, is economics. So let me go and clear that real quick. Go down to economics here. So another field that we study, of course, is economics. You guys have heard this quite a bit, especially nowadays, especially since with the COVID pandemic going on and how it's having a huge impact on the economy. And you as a student may or may not know what that means. So let's go and talk about that. What is economics? Economics is nothing more than the study of how people manage their resources by producing, exchanging, and using goods and services. Economics, when it comes down to it, is all about choices, all right? When you're talking about your economics, things that you're looking at, for example, are resources. That's probably the biggest portion that makes up economics, all right? Now, what do we mean by resources? These resources could be natural resources like fuel, animals that you harvest, farmland, that kind of thing. You have human resources, which are how educated your population, what kind of skills do they have? Do you have very many people in your country, or do you have very few people in your country? How are they being impacted, in your country? For example, COVID-19 would be an example of how human resources have definitely been impacted. All right, and you also have capital. Capital are things like resources like money, machinery, items that you can have, factories, infrastructure. These are things that people need in order to create their economy as well. So these are the things we're talking about. We're talking about resources. We're talking about how we go about using those resources as well. At the same time, we also have different types of economic systems that also exist as well. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail when we actually break down into going further into economics. But for example, we basically have like two different types of economic systems. You have, for example, what's called a market economy, where individual businesses decide what the consumer wants. Basically, it's a free market economy. You're very familiar with this type of economic system because it's the exact same economic system we use here in the United States. There's very little government regulation. Pretty much you're free to buy or sell, or not to buy or sell, whatever you want. That's pretty much how it works. We also have a command economy, which is the complete opposite of that, where the government decides what's into being produced, what's being sold, what you can buy, what you can't buy, to the point where you have no individual choice and the government kind of controls everything at that point. But like I said, these are two very broad categories, but we'll break down into it even further as we go throughout the year and clarify a little bit more what we mean by economics as well. Also, things we also look at it too is things like levels of development is another thing we look at when it comes to economics. For example, do you have high economic development in your country, or do you have very low economic level in your country? High level of economics, usually people have longer lives, they're healthier, they make decent salaries, they have services that help them out, infrastructure that helps them survive. If you have low levels of development, things usually cause that are things like low literacy rates, short life expectancy, not much economic development, not that many natural resources. There's a whole laundry list of different things that it talks about when we're talking about development in terms of economic systems. But like I said, we'll go into that field deeper into it as we go out throughout the entirety of the year. Like I said, for this course, it's mainly just kind of like a brief description of what you can expect from these areas as well. All right, so that's an example of what we're talking about for economics. Let's go and clear up my annotations real quick, and we'll talk about the very last area. Now, the very last area of study that we look at, of course, is called culture. All right, so what is culture? Culture is nothing more than the beliefs, customs, laws, art, and ways of living that a group of people share. Okay, that is what a culture is. It is these distinct characteristics amongst a group of people that separates one culture from another. As you guys are very, very aware, people of different cultures have very different ways of behaving, different beliefs, different ways of expressing those beliefs. Things like music, dance, and literature, these are all examples of some important contributions that culture has. And it's kind of neat because in the United States, for example, our country is kind of like a melting pot in the sense that we have culture from all over the entirety of the planet. The United States, for example, is the most culturally diverse population in the world. I mean, if you think about it, almost every single different national culture that exists in the world usually has a population of some sort living here in the United States. And these cultures sometimes blend, they sometimes interact with one another, sometimes they're adopted by different groups as well. And we'll talk about that especially when we talk about the United States, because a lot of American culture, when you think of American culture, a lot of it comes from the different ethnic groups that have immigrated to the United States over time and that our country as a whole have adopted as part of our national culture as well, which is actually kind of cool. When we're talking about that, those things are called cultural traits. These are things that are very distinctive and very different from one culture to the next, and understanding those cultural traits will help you kind of get a better holistic understanding of the different world populations. So that's going to do it for this lesson, ladies and gentlemen. As always, just like I said before, these are the 5 areas that we're talking about. We're talking about history and geography. We're talking about government, economics. We're also talking about culture. By studying these 5 areas of social studies and the social studies skills associated with them, you can get a better understanding about the different communities all over the planet, have a more holistic approach, holistic meaning open-minded approach about all these different cultural groups and understanding who they are, where they come from, and what kind of values they have as well, which is also kind of neat. So now that we're done talking about these items, what you guys need to do now is work on your guys' questions. In this case, you guys are working on questions 3 Alpha, 3 Charlie, as well as question number 4. And remember, you guys, you're answering these in race format, where you restate, answer, cite, as well as explain. And of course, I have a video lesson about how to do that. By this point, you guys should be pretty good at that. Alright you guys, so that's going to do it for this lesson. As always, if you have any questions or need any clarifications, please do not hesitate to send me a question or email me. I'll be more than happy to help you guys out. That's going to do it for this digital lesson, you guys. I will catch you guys in the next one. You guys peace out, and you guys keep on rocking. See you on the next lesson.